Since it is a class, let me welcome all of you, the students in class. The very important student, Lizelle, who had it. Very good. The future belongs to them. So welcome. Yeah. Last time when I was invited by AR was the 4th of July, 2015. And Arambe NBC came to capture me. And they went to report us, then we were expelled. So now I'm here again. I don't know what the consequences of this is. Whether it is expulsion or thunder, I don't know. Needless to say, I want to commend the young people, Joe Bampanda, George Kambala, and Dino Yoma, and all of you young people who have remained jiggy on the principles of your generation and not betrayed. I think you deserve a round of applause. I want to welcome all of you. Of course, we know that this is a classroom where we are not one political party. We are all from all various political parties. Blue always joked that some come from Mbishi party. Mbishi party is what is English for Mbishi? It's a cat party. So in other words, everybody is important, and each one of you is important. Elders that are here, we welcome you. I see my good sister who's doing a fine job with the Patriot. The Patriot has made a niche for itself. It's a newspaper that young and old are not missing on a Friday. So we commend you immensely. And also my sister, Kasiko Mkadigospweka of Insight Magazine. Thank you for being here, together with the crew I see there. Ladies and gentlemen, all of you, and of course I see Comrade Kafita has become with the beard, I don't know what happened. It's a Taliban. Comrade Hiwana, I can see marriage is really nice. Yeah. All of you that are here, including those that are dispatched with particular information and assignment to report back, you are also acknowledged immensely, and hopefully, because it is raining, we pray that you will relay very good information in the interest of Harambe. And Patrick, very good to see you. I dance to that music too from time to time, but not as good as you do. Yeah, so really I'm very happy and humbled to have been invited. I accepted to be here to speak about an issue that is very profound to all of us. It's a generational issue, and we will say it the way it must be said. Yeah, fellow UNAM, you're here too. Yeah, so if I'm expelled from UNAM, you are the witness. It's a topic that I think all of us can relate to, and I hope thereafter we can engage in some questions. I was asked to make a paper. Now, you see these young people, they are very naughty. They wanted me to write a paper about this discussion. And then some media, this France, they want me to give talking points, maybe so that they can hold me to it. Generally, of course, I prefer to speak off the cuff. it is more natural. I will try to do that where possible, but of course, they can have theirs. Of course, Professor Joe, you are promoted now. Yeah. Now, the topic we have chosen is intergenerational politics and what we call the dream of sustainable development. We picked intergenerational politics. For those of you who are familiar with it, with international environmental law, you know that there are principles in international law, and there are many lawyers. I see Taimi, them are here, Chimtukeni and others. Saki is here, yes. Kadila, and all of them, the lawyers are here. They would know these principles of international law. Particularly from 1972. Welcome from Oranienburg. From 1972, there was the Stockholm Conference on Human Development, as it was called. And that set the stage of developing certain principles of how to manage the environment, of course, how to balance that with development. Specifically, at that time, there was no particular emphasis placed on defining sustainable development per se, but they did make reference to various concepts that would mean, or at least imply, sustainable development. And the principles are listed. Specific for this talk today, we can look at Principle 21 and Principle 2, which is more relevant, on how any generation should be able to manage the resources or the economic wealth of the country for the benefit of those that are living and for the benefit of those that are yet unborn. In other words, some of the lexicography is called future generations. And it was not until 1987 when former Minister of Environment was tasked by the UN General Assembly to head a commission which was called Our Common Future. It was then that sustainable development was defined. And it is in there where intergenerational equity equally emerged. So therefore we can start this discussion by going to 1987. How many of you were the chromosomes were formed by that time? 87. Oh, very good. You are good witnesses. So 87, specifically then this whole concept of sustainable development was born. Namely, manage the resources of your respective country in such a way that those present must benefit from it and those yet unborn must equally not be prejudiced, so that they too must enjoy their livelihood from it. And that is sustainable development. And then, of course, I'm sure so many of you are aware of the Rio Summit. Tamwa, I couldn't see you, I was looking for you. Lazarus Jacob, he's our veteran. Welcome, Tamwa. Yeah. And many of you would recall that in 1992, there was a big summit, which was called Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro, where hundreds of presidents and thousands of NGOs, journalists, etc., went to attend what would become the defining moment in environmental protection, particularly in the aspects of consolidating or crystallizing international environmental principles. And these are now the principles, and there are so many, but they include precautionary principle, polluter pays principle. I think we know these principles, isn't it? Polluter pay, it means that if you pollute, you pay. Precautionary principle is particularly relevant for, very relevant for some of the brothers and sisters who are speaking of wanting to embark on certain environmental projects. That before you embark on any project, you must make sure that you take precaution, especially when such a project has adverse environmental impact. That's precautionary principle. Then, of course, intergenerational equity, then common but differentiated responsibility, where developed countries have a responsibility to assist those countries that are not developed in exchange and transfer of technology and so forth. Of course, there are others in here to whom these principles are very well known. This is just the background to why we chose this intergenerational politics to set a stage that we speak in environmental terms, but also to speak in political terms. And contextualize that on the one hand, you have a battle between development and environment, but on the other, you actually have the battle between the young and the old in the management of the resources of the country. Of course, geographically, we are speaking of Namibia, but the concepts that we speak of today can apply anywhere in Africa. So, for us, for example, as you know, our constitution was arrived at through consensus. Some of you will call it other names, but it was brought about by those other people we call Western Contact Group. We know them, isn't it? Yeah, France, West Germany, Canada, England, US, there are 5. What's the other one? West Germany, Canada, USA, UK, France. So 5. These are the ones that dictated, or at least that were part of what is called Western Contact Group. So they assisted us, for lack of a better word, to come up with our constitution. But despite whatever shortcomings our constitution might have, Article 95 in particular speaks about environmental protection in ways and in tone and rhythm that actually speaks to the multilateralism of environmental protection as contemplated 1972, 1987, 1992, and lo and behold, you know also of a UN big meeting that took place on the African continent. Which one was that? Johannesburg Summit, 2002, was it? You remember where the founding president told Blair off? Yes, that was in Johannesburg. Now, the principles as contained in our constitution on Article 95 are very progressive and forward-looking. And then you take Article 100, it equally then speaks to the state sovereignty or sovereignty over our resources. Of course, there is a caveat to the end of that provision, which says, unless it is lawfully owned. Generations present here today and generations yet unborn will probably talk more about what that means and what the implication of that is. Be that as it may, it is a progressive provision and which we hope maybe one of those days it needs to be revisited. But the point I'm setting the stage for is to say the following. Maybe some of you have heard of this being said, and I want to quote. I conceive that land belongs to a vast family of whom many are dead, a few are living, and countless hosts are still unborn, and unquote. And guess what? That is coming from a traditional leader somewhere in Africa, in this case specifically in Ghana. If you listen to the phraseology used, that is no different from the definition I have alluded to of sustainable development. So which means, to come to our context, is that it may be true that those who have degrees and those who have had access to education, particularly Western education, might have been exposed to certain terms and to certain measure of education. But maybe common sense education is found in our villages. Because this is a traditional leader speaking better than some phraseologies that we know. So what am I saying in the context of intergenerational politics? I want now to come to the point where we try to interrogate what precisely am I referring to when I speak of intergenerational politics. Now, so many of you are aware the conundrum, for lack of a better word. We can then say that these elders have been monopolizing political power. And then there is perhaps an understandable impression on the part of the young Turks, as we would want them known, that no man, you have been in power for too long, you didn't do anything for us. But here is the irony. The irony is that maybe they have been in power for long, but also the fact remains that they have made provision for the young ones to go to school, imperfect as that school system is. Let's take, for example, Zimbabwe. Those who are highly educated in Africa, most of them are from Zimbabwe. Is that true or not? Most of those who are highly educated may be from Nigeria. True or not? In this room, most of those who are highly educated are from Namibia. True or not? We have doctors. There's a doctor there, Dr. Kanime. There's Dr. Ipinge. There are journalists, maybe there are other doctors. Yeah. There are doctors in business. There are doctors in swimming. There are doctors in Kachikiriri. Like my Ngumwe, she's also a doctor in her own right. Some are lawyers. Now the point I'm trying to say here is that yes, we can say that, wait a minute, these elders have overstayed, but they made provision for us to study. And as Shakespeare would say, but there is the rub. So how come then that the elders have been able to make provision for us to study or for you to study, as if to forget that with time you will amass some kind of expertise, which expertise would require that you have to question certain things. Asho? Yeah, some are pilots, by the way. Maybe the problem then of this intergenerational politics comes precisely at how we view the countries that we now call independent today. So if Job is a lecturer, is a professor, now somebody is 87-year-old and works in his class, what do you think the impression of that elder would be by looking at the person entering as a professor. Maybe there will be resistance. What can he teach me, this young one? What can he tell me, this young one? And then we extrapolate this further. So assets, you can now take note. For example, there are so many of you who have heard and continue to hear some lexicography in our political body, in our body politic. You hear that the problem is these young people. You hear that these AR are a problem.